Darren, this is just mental, isn't it? It's madness. Fisher people. I mean, look online. Number one, all of the fishermen who are women want to be called fishermen. They find it offensive them being referred to as fisher people. Number two, I think there's something like 6% of the workforce that actually is female. I mean, what's going on here? What are the BBC doing?
Exactly. And so this is actually an advisory note from the BBC about gender and job titles that led to Radio 4 Today programme referring to fisher people rather than fishermen. Listen, I think this just goes to the very heart of why it's so important that this government doesn't renege on its pledge to reform the BBC licence fee, because ultimately, Dan, you and I, if we want to watch live television, we've got to fund this ultra woke nonsense. It's basically the views of an idiot like Justin Trudeau or the National Union of Students. It's the politics of these people that we've got to fund. A cultural and liberal elite that's so completely out of touch and far removed from the British people that it purports to represent. I mean, Dan, I would laugh even harder if this wasn't so cartoon. You know, the fact that the BBC, we are told, left liberals wax lyrical about how good bang for your buck the BBC is, that we're all forced to pay for. But ultimately, I think this is an embarrassment on the world stage. The fact that our national broadcaster, public service broadcaster, has mandated its staff refer to fisher people over fisher men, when actually no one serious anyway has called for that. No one is saying that that's going to harm any form of society, anyone within society, if they are referred to as fishermen. I just think it's cartoon and it's extreme, and it goes to the very heart of how out of touch this organisation is and why the government needs to hold its nerve and bring it into line.
But doesn't Katya Adler need to personally man up? Yep, I just said it. A gender term. She needs
Cancelled,
to man
Dan,
up
cancelled.
and say, no, I'm not going to say fisher people. This is ridiculous. My role as a reporter at the BBC is not to try and change the way that we've spoken for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not to create new words.
Oh, well, Dan, I think you've made a fundamental mistake there in your assumption that Katya Adler would disagree with the advisory note from the Today programme.
No, I'm sure she probably did agree.
Well, quite. I'm quite sure that most of the liberal left, which dominate that broadcaster, overwhelmingly agree with this note. And that's the problem, right? Is that we are all coerced with threat of prison to pay for the BBC, yet it's so far removed from everyone that it purports to represent. And the BBC has clearly, we've seen today retweets of the Labour Party from people at the BBC, and they have no intention of changing.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about this because Chris Packham, it's sort of a test case, really, for whether these new social media rules introduced by the BBC are actually going to mean a thing, Darren Grimes, because he retweeted a post by Angela Rayner, who is the deputy leader of the Labour Party, accusing the Tories of cronyism. It was a highly politicised tweet. He is a presenter on the BBC, paid for by us. And Tim Davie, the new Director General, said when these new social media regulations were introduced that presenters would face disciplinary action, including being sacked. Today, the BBC is refusing to comment on this Chris Packham tweet. So doesn't it make a mockery of these new social media rules, Darren? Because any other presenter now will say, well, they did nothing to Chris Packham. They're not going to do anything to me either.
You're bang on the money. It's evidence that nothing, absolutely nothing, not one iota of the BBC is going to change. Tim Davie rode in like a sort of knight on a white horse, saying that he was going to save the BBC from itself. But, you know, in trying to coming in so strong and saying he was going to do all of this to ensure that they could bat off any claims of bias on social media and even on their own channels, it's quite clear now that the BBC just won't listen and they've got no intention of changing. And I wonder, Dan, if Boris hadn't got rid of Dominic Cummings at the weekend, the BBC were actually scared for the first time in many years.
Not anymore.
And not anymore.
They think the war is over. They think the Downing Street war on the BBC is over with Dominic Cummings out the door.
Exactly. And that, I think, would be a betrayal of all of the people like my family who lent Boris their vote for the first time in their lives. He has a mandate to reform institutions like the BBC. And I think he mustn't renege on that just to keep the peace as reported with his girlfriend or whatever else it is that's going on. I think the rest of Britain, Dan, has been ignored for far too long. And Boris promised he would change that. So he needs to get the agenda back on track by delivering on decriminalisation of the licence fee, first of all, and then committing to the funding model changing as a follow-up. That's the only way we're going to get any genuine reform of that broadcaster.